Okay, well, welcome. Good, almost afternoon here, about 2 minutes before. To all of you who are joining us live at this moment, or to those of you who may be joining us later on and watching it at your own spare time, and continuing the conversations with us as men and masculine folks on how we as men navigate current events and issues to be healthier and striving to be healthier versions of ourselves in building community with one another. Again, my name is Pheng, using he, him pronouns. And this is our 20th conversation, almost a whole year's worth of conversation that we're close to hitting at the mark at this moment. 4 more, and then I think we've hit a whole year's worth of conversation, perhaps, if I'm doing my math right. Or we do these conversations obviously twice a month, bi-weekly on Thursdays, and so really happy to always be joined by this fabulous group of men folks who are here with me, and so I'll have them introduce themselves here before I go on into the conversation that we're going to have today.
I'm Roderic, Southall in Minneapolis, he, him. Good to be here.
Hello, everyone. My name is Felix Martinez. My pronouns are he, him, and his. Reporting from Eagan, Minnesota. Happy to be here too.
Hello, everyone. Serrano Robinson. I use he, him, his pronouns. Out of Duluth, Minnesota. Thank you for having me.
Hey friends, Sean Hayes here, he, him, and his. I'm also up in Duluth and very, very grateful to be with you all.
Well, thank you. And as always, for those of you who are joining in the conversation at this moment via Facebook, Austin is the one that's chatting with you and relaying messages back to us so that we can include that into the conversation. And we always welcome conversations later on or comments later on as well too. So be sure to send us your thoughts and your questions, and we will definitely help you continue these conversations within your own homes or in the relationships that you have with the folks that are in your lives. Continuing from the conversation 2 weeks ago, obviously, we want to continue to have conversations about healing, not only just mental health and mental wellness, but healing amongst and with men. And what does that really look like, right? In the relationships that we have with men, we know and understand that men have the highest suicide rates. Men also experience the most violence globally as well too, and are also the ones who enacted onto each other as well globally. And so there's a lot of trauma and violence that we understand men to have experienced in their own lives, and masculine identified people experiencing in their own lives as well too. And yet at the same time, we also understand that we as men and masculine folks still benefit from patriarchal systems and structures, right, in the societies or communities that we all each live in and thrive in. And so we wanted to continue to have the conversation about collective healing or community healing, and what does being in the care of other men and masculine folks look like for each one of us? What does it mean to be in authentic relationship and in healing relationship with other men? And I think that that's why we continue to create this platform, and that we continue to encourage men and masculine folks in community throughout Minnesota to continue to have these conversations and build those kinds of spaces where men and masculine folks can come and have conversations and be accepted and do and express themselves in ways in which they may not be able to fully express themselves. And we find it vitally important to continue this conversation about healing, particularly healing with other men in ways where we can deconstruct homophobia, where we can deconstruct transphobia, and where we can just deconstruct misogyny and sexism within our lives. And so that's sort of like the starting place here. I don't really have guiding questions, but now that I'm thinking about it, maybe perhaps the starting questions are like, how are you healing in the relationships with the men in your lives? And how has that come about? How did that come about? Why was it so important for you to stick in those relationships and keep doing the emotional work that you need to do with the men and masculine folks that you are in relationship with?
I would say it's definitely like when I notice it, when I have like the time and energy to look up, which is good to like have that time and energy to do so. It's definitely going. When I think about the men that I keep like close to me, it almost seems like kind of what I do and who I am radiates like in the ways that like I really want to, in the ways that are very like honest. So I even have friends who, when we talk, I like even tell them to be like more open, being more vulnerable, and like I explain to them what I mean like by when I talk to youth. Like I work with youth, teaching like social emotional skills and being able to actually speak about how they're feeling, being aware of their emotions. So when I talk to my friends, like you immediately start to see just from like me modeling, like, you know, because I vent to them when I come very emotional, I come as I am, and they keep me there, they keep me close. So I eventually see that like kind of reciprocating them. Like I have this one friend who just like kind of damn near went through like a breakthrough of like now I'm actually seeing him being emotional as a person. As to he was just always angry. Like if we would ever talk, like if he would ever bring something to me, he was just angry. And this one day he just like cried, and I just like I feel like a burst like for him. Um, and that's what I mean by like it's getting better, because like when I looked up, I'm like, oh, like he's actually being able to actively be emotional. I'm like, I know you're cool, like right, like we know our friends and our loved ones are cool. Like we know if I ever need you for a problem, you're gonna be there. If I ever need you for anything, I know you're gonna show up. But I also need to know, like, are you going to be emotionally aware if I ever need you in that department? Because that's very like that's needed. So I definitely show up like to my friends very authentically. Like my friends are like, how you doing today? I'm having a bad day. I'm feeling real like down about something, and I'll still go chill with them. Like I wouldn't neglect like how I feel, and they wouldn't allow me to neglect like how I felt either. So I think doing that, being honest about how I felt, really rubbed off on all like a lot of my male friends, because I think that's healthy. Like it's healthy for them to come to me, and our conversations are changing now. They're actually telling me how they're feeling about certain situations. Like, cause I know for men, we just like to use words like fucked up and these things, but I started using those words like heartbroken and just different things to actually make you feel what I'm saying. You know, fucked up is a word that like we use, but it doesn't have a feeling to it. If I say, oh, this was heartbroken, like that actually gives you a little bit of what I'm trying to say. Like that broke a piece of me. Like it was hard for me to take that. Um, so I think like being able to model that, I'm seeing it now more in my friends. Like, and it varies in ages because I'm 26, but I have an old soul. So I have friends who range from like 40s to, you know, obviously down in the late teens. And um, I just want them to see that, and they are. And that's what I'm really feeling like now. I guess what I'm trying to say is I hear more of what they really feel in situations, other than like the outside shell. I'm getting like into this without even knowing what it's about. It's just like understanding that they have feelings, you know, underneath that anger. Last week or last 2 weeks that I was talking about how we all have just a layer of anger, but under that there's something really like hidden. And now I'm starting to see the hidden piece. Some of them are hurt, some of them have been abandoned, some of them haven't had enough love like that they thought that they needed. And so I think for me and my friend group specifically, me coming as I am, because I can come with you to play ball, to kick it and go to a party. But I'm also the type that if I need to cry, I'm gonna be around you as well. I'm not gonna hide it. I'm not gonna like, I don't feel less like manly when I cry in front of people, because I'm like, you're gonna see me anyway, and I'm gonna look a lot more angry if I don't get a chance to cry. So for me, it's more about knowing myself and modeling that. And it's been a flip. It's been really, really like cool. It's been really like heart feeling to see my friends like just yeah, just be full of what they're feeling. Like I see all my dude friends happy, angry, but it's good to see them like feel the hurt that they're actually going through, or feel the lack of love that they're actually going through. Um, so that's how it is. I would definitely say it's turning, because I'm seeing a lot of my friends kind of talk about more about how they feel in the situations.
I think, and listen to Serrano, I think he hit the spot. I think when you ask most of my friends how they're doing, they're always doing great. They're having the time of their lives. They're never struggling. But through their behaviors, the way that they show up, I see that anger. I see that sadness, hopeless, they're anxious. And sometimes I'm very careful when I approach them, because I want to be sure that I approach them in a place that maybe they're not going to feel like, that because for them to show their feelings maybe in front of other people, they're not gonna feel good about it, just because they want to go back to try to defend themselves. No, I'm doing fine. What's going on with you, Felix? So Is to, you know, approach them in a way that they feel that they're loved, that with good intentions, but also noticing that there's something that they're dealing with. You know, well, as human beings, sometimes we need to deal with things at work and your home, you know, life in general, and being sure that, you know, we as a man stop fighting those demons that we have in our mind sometimes, trying to show up strength by not talking about our feelings, and the importance of, you know, sometimes having someone where you can talk about it and look for help, because it's hard to talk about when we're going through a hard time, but us keeping all that anger inside of us, it makes us sometimes to explode, you know, to yell at people that maybe don't need to be yelled just because we're dealing with things ourselves. So it's very important to when we notice those, you know, things in our friends, just to approach them with love and respect, and let them know, you know what, you know, I'm here to support you. How may I help you? And try to as men start learning to deal with our health, our mental health problems. Remember to breathe. You know, that's something I personally always forget, to breathe. Sometimes when I start to feel anxious, I don't breathe, and I start getting like out of control. And then I remember, okay, let me breathe, and it make a huge difference on me. But at the same time, creating that trust, like Serrano made with his friends, where, you know, when they're going through a hard time, they're gonna come to you. They know that they have a person that they can speak with, that they can cry if they need to, but at the same time, they're gonna help them and support them in during that situation. Because as men, it's hard, you know, to talk about your feelings, especially with all the expectations of the society. You know, you need to deal with everything in the house, you know, and then that people relying on you because they think that you're the one who's gonna solve everything. And it's tough. It's tough, and that's something that when I talk to my daughters, I want them to learn how to deal sometimes with those problems, you know, the importance of resiliency, and to give it that strength to go through those hard times, to realize that they're capable of going through everything, but doing it by yourself is probably not the best way. There's always people that can support you. Looking for mental health is always a good thing. Talking to a therapist is not a bad thing. That doesn't mean you're crazy. It means that you need some help to get your life straight and start taking better decisions that are going to help you and the people around you to deal with problems and with situations that sometimes are out of our control.
So I have found it fascinating a bit as people like are in intersections. And so when I say intersections, I mean like the pandemic to me it's a social intersection. So it sort of broke apart the sort of that exterior that some folks I'm in relationship have had. Another intersection has been divorce. You know, I had a couple of friends who got divorced, and that, you know, so when I speak of intersections, I think that I've found some interesting opportunities to access what until then, right, it seemed like a pretty authentic relationship, right? And when I say authentic, I mean sort of through and through, right? Or consistently accessible. So it's been kind of George Floyd was an intersection, is an intersection. So it's been very interesting to have these conversations that are both new territory, actually, for these folks I know and myself, and a little bit disorienting. I would maybe suggest on both sides, because I think that sometimes, you know, I can assume that someone like talking to me about stuff under the surface is like hard for them, but it actually is really hard for both of us. So I'm often replaying to my mind as we part, thinking, you know, was I silent long enough? Did I respond the right way? Did we have closure, right? what will happen the next time we meet? You know, do I start pulling that string again? So it's been really sort of a fascinating time to see that. And some folks I know have been retiring, which I think is another intersection, because they're in retired one friend in particular who was like, was kind of re-examining his life as he retired, socially, economically, because those things that had been there for him, his job, his career, his identity, were kind of leaving. And so it's been a really rich time to be around folks at those times of intersection. And it makes me, I think, wonder, based on the last two comments, how to find intersections outside of those moments of sort of transformation, which is probably easier to have deeper conversations when people are a bit in crisis. And it's also probably easier because in those cases, it's a crisis of not necessarily their own doing, if you will, for example, right? So there's not as much shame, I would say, in them, in us having these and unpacking some stuff in those moments. So there you go.
Yeah, I was thinking about for myself too. I mean, I think at the beginning of the pandemic, I think that was sort of a hard pause for so many of us, and a chance to sort of reset and look at the ways that we were being together and not being able to physically be together. Like, I think we had a lot of conversations at our work and with close friends around us, about how we need to be intentional about still trying to connect and all of that through this time of just big disconnection, throughout the world. And I was actually having a conversation with a friend earlier this morning and just kind of sharing how I'm really grateful that it was sort of at that point in my life where I was like, I do really want to like invest and like be more intentional with like all of the people in my life, but especially the men and masculine people, because I know for myself, for so many years, the people I was closest to and still am oftentimes are women and feminine identifying folks and folks outside of the binary. And so I think for myself as a trans man, I sort of shied away from those relationships with other men because there was some fear around, am I man enough? Am I going to be, welcomed into these circles? And so for me, having a lot of that intentional practice has really served me, into this year and even into the last 2 weeks. Myself and some chosen family and really our whole community here in Duluth has really been dealing with a lot of grief over the loss of a dear friend of ours, Evan Adams, community leader, advocate for youth, just a really strong, powerful, loving person in our community. And he died by suicide, about a week and a half ago. And so our community has been reeling. I've been reeling. He was like a brother to me and part of our chosen family. And so, having the chance to practice, like reaching out to the guys in my life and having those opportunities before these last 2 weeks, like, I hadn't thought a lot about it, but like, that's huge, because now in these last 2 weeks, lots of folks have been reaching out and checking in with me and so many other folks who are just, heartbroken over this. And I was just with our dear friend Ed yesterday, and he sat with me for 2 hours and listened to me talk about Evan's life and how I was feeling, and I cried and and we hugged, and it was just like this really beautiful moment. And I've had so many of those because of, I think, you know, making that choice to be real, to not try to hide how I'm feeling, to hide sadness and all of the feelings that I'm feeling in this time, and so many of us. And so it has really felt like a gift in that way, that I've had the ability to like be in these conversations with all of you, and really intentionally building deep connections, because I you know, if I was alone these last 2 weeks, I don't know. I don't know how I would have done. And I know there's lots of folks out there who don't have those kinds of connections, or maybe don't think that they do, or, you know, don't feel like they could reach out to just talk about how they're doing. And it's huge. I think it's very clear to me that I cannot do this on my own. Like, I can't get through life. I can't get through the hard things, and I don't want to go through like the good things alone either. You know, it's like very clear to me that we need each other, that we need to like be having these conversations, and crying when the tears come, and not like just automatically trying to, you know, wipe that away and hide what's really going on there. Because I think like it's exhausting to try to hide that and to like keep it from people, and it really weighs on us, I think, when we do that, and we sort of just stuff it back in and pretend like shit's okay when it really isn't. And yeah, I think it's really powerful to have the relationships that I do with men and masculine people, because there's a different kind of understanding and a different way that I think we are with each other, and that's really, really powerful and healing.
Yeah, I definitely agree with what you're sharing there, and echoing some of what both Felix, Roderic, and Serrano shared as well too, in terms of like, I think back to my own childhood or as a young adult and as a young masculine man person, man folk, and trying to find spaces, right? And saying, what are the spaces where I can actually have the ability to just express myself, right? And that those spaces couldn't just be with my sisters, biologically, quote unquote, and then or my sisters in the community who I've been building with and in relationship with, and the women and girls in my community. But like, where are those spaces where men, folks, and masculine identified people can come together and really be with one another in the way in which we're having this conversation today, right? Or in similar ways. And there wasn't that many. There was just so few at that time. You know, not that there's a whole lot these days either, but there was very few, right? There was very few places in which I could go and be able to just like sort of like go, oh goodness, like I can take off this defense mechanism that I have, or take off what I think Jackson Katz puts beautifully, take off the armor that I have and not wear that armor of like masculinity, of rigid masculinity and rigid manhood and needing to be tough, and really just be. I'm not even talking about like being emotional. I'm talking about like just be, like just being me, and not have to worry about whether I was being judged or not. And I think it was really hard to find those spaces, and there were very few young men that I was in relationship with that I felt I could do that with, right? And I can be myself in those ways. And so I always think about this one relationship that I have with a close friend of mine for the last 20, close to 30 years here. And we walked each other through a lot of things, right? We've had those kinds of like deep conversations. We walked through each other through hard times and bad times, and had arguments and disagreed and not liked each other in moments, but been able to come back and struggle with one another, right? And I find that oftentimes in my earlier relationships, if I were to have those types of disagreements or fights or whatnot, those relationships would be done with other men, right? Or with other young men. He punched me in the eye, we're done. You know, I broke his leg, or he betrayed me, he stabbed me in the back, I'm done. We're done. Screw him. One of these days, I'm gonna revenge on him, right? So going to that place of revenge, but I think clearly to Serrano's point a few weeks ago is like, if I had looked further, and society or community has taught me to allow me to look further, um, then I would see my hurt in that and my sadness in that, right? Of like, how is it that this is possible, right? And so I just think about in this conversation about how this came about for me in terms of connecting with men and masculine folks and the power that lies in that, right? Like um, the usefulness of the power that lies in that, I should say, because power has really no good or bad to it. It's a matter of how one uses it, as Ellen Pence put it. Um, and so I believe that there's some good in men connecting with one another and masculine identified people connecting with one another and building healthier relationships and healthier versions of each other and helping each other succeed to be healthy, so that then we don't actually then use um, use choices that are actually then harmful or violent towards the people in our communities who are most vulnerable, meaning women and girls and queer folks.
Yeah, I'll share a quick story here of having those spaces to talk to people about, masculinity. And, I grew up in a household where my dad was very strict, and he yelled at me every time I made a mistake and used to hit me. And, and that caused a lot of insecurities on me. And since I've been working in this field, healthy masculinity, gender-based violence, etc., I've been just having more conversations that I never had before with my dad. And I'm not being asked for consent with my dad to talk about this story, but if he's listening, hopefully he'll see the good intentions on me right now. So we always been having this type of conversations. And 2 weeks ago, I was visiting for Mother's Day. I went to Arizona to spend time with my sisters and my mom. That been probably like 20 years that I haven't spent specifically Mother's Day with her because she lives in Puerto Rico. I live here in Minnesota. So I was having a conversation with my dad and another individual, and that individual was just using his privilege and talking against, a group of people. I'm not gonna specify what group of people, but for first time ever, I heard my dad stepping up and confronting that person, putting aside his privilege. And while all this time been thinking, I've been talking to my dad and he always stayed quiet. He never say anything back to me. And he, for first time I hear him stepping up and taking his, his, I wouldn't say his power, but his privilege, put him aside and say, you know what? This is what I believe, and stepping in my side, it brings me so much joy. I was so proud, and I never had a chance to say, go back to my dad, because that wasn't the time I was just coming back to here to Minnesota. Just to tell him, you know what, thank you for stepping, up and not being silent, because being silent is why most of the time, make us part of the problem. But seeing my dad finally say, you know what, that's what you're saying is not right. This community is being oppressed, and you just, because of your privilege, you're not seeing that, you're just taking advantage of it. And it brings me a lot of joy. It also brings me a lot of hope that sometimes when we having this conversation with friends, sometimes we think they're not listening. We think that, that you're wasting your time, because sometimes that's how we feel, when you see people that they're using their power to take advantage, and you try to give an advice and do it with love and compassion, and you say, you know what, this guy never gonna change. That's how things are. But when I saw my dad making that change, I was so happy. And using this moment, just to thank him, for making that step, because for me it means a lot, and bring me a lot of hope. So yeah.
I really love that question. I think it was a question that Roderic kind of posed about, like, and I might just mess this up, but I'm gonna do it anyway. But I think it was about like, how do you like have these conversations, I believe, when they're not in crisis, or when something is not immensely like going on. And that's a really big question. And I think what one of my friends, like Kenny, helped me realized like it could be one of the forms. This could be through check-in, because when you asked that, I was like, I don't know. I was like, because all of it seems through, yeah, crisis is like, you know, when we come together. But he makes it a thing to either like text me in the morning or I text him, and then now it grew into like an actual relationship of like, he's my friend, but literally every day we're just like checking in, whether I'm texting him first, he's texting me. Some days I'll think about it like, all right, it's like 1 p.m. I haven't heard from him. Let me text. And then literally some days he'll be like, it's been like 3 days. I haven't. And when he see me, he tells me that too. And my mom, there was like a story of why I think check-ins is a really good like way of like helping people cope and helping people like check in on a daily basis. Because I blew up, right? Soda bottle tactic. Like I felt like nobody was actually calling me to check up on me because a lot of my family's in New York. So that's real hard, and it's not their fault. Like it's just hard to live in 2 different states in general with your family. It's just very hard. I'm the only one here out of my immediate family, so it's extremely hard. And you know, but there's obviously financial like things that I do for them and vice versa. So there's still stuff to be done. And I think one day I just blew up. What I was feeling was I was feeling like people weren't like checking up on me. I felt like people were just like only hitting me up when they needed something. Um, and it came out in a really nasty way, like with me and my mom. And I was like, well, what the fuck? It feels like y'all only calling me like when y'all need something. And she's like, is that how you really feel? Like, and to be honest, it wasn't like how I really feel. It was just like a blow reaction. But I did feel like I should have like a more of a communication with me and my family, with people that I actually love. So now I actually have 2 to 3 people, like my friend Kenny and my mom, who daily, like either I text them or they text me, just checking in. And that even just like helps me, you know, just know that people care about you. I think that's one of the things that men, like we struggle with, people in general, but men specifically, we struggle with the acceptance that people give a fuck about us. So I'm gonna say that again. We struggle with the acceptance that people actually care about us. And it's very true. So I had to like, and those are one of the things that helped me see that is somebody can take the time to actually check up on you every day. And then when I say like, when I give like a little buzz of how I'm like, if the feeling is like not like super positive or off tone, they're willing to go deeply, call me, come check out, come hang out. So I definitely think like just being able to check up, having 1 or 2 people maybe that you check up with every day, whether it's just literally saying hi. Like I think literally as men, we forget like that people are in our lives emotionally. We remember like financially, like privilege wise, we remember so many different aspects, but emotionally we forget that we have people in our lives. And I'm a prime like person of that. I always forget until like I know how it feels to be texted in the morning, like, damn, or you do like, and they do care. But it's that rock, it's that wall that we have up. It's that fuck that nobody cares. And so even I'm working through it, and yeah, I live it though. Every day, just seeing my mom text me or being able to text her and get that text back, it just shows, yeah, it shows that this is real. Like, but I'm like having to retell myself, instead of getting to that point to where I'm like, ain't nobody texting me and I ain't texting nobody either. It is a 2-way street, respectfully, but you know, we bad at accountability too. So, but yeah, I think that was a great question about like how do you have that communication like when it's not like in crisis mode? Because yeah, 99% of the time for men, when we're speaking about how we feel, it's because we're at the brink of doing something probably worse, of doing something way more toxic than how we expect it to go. So how do you do it like when it's not about crisis? I would throw it in there to say like maybe check-ins. That seems to have helped me. I don't want to say that it works. I would just say that it seems to have helped me kind of retell myself like, you know, yeah, like people do care about you. It's not getting overly upset about things that you're not fully thinking about. It just really helps me stay grounded as a man. So
That's funny. I was also thinking about how it gets complicated when it's not just one-on-one, and like how this group of people I know, one-on-one, I think they're people are revealing, but when we get together as a group, there is like a bottom below which we shall not go emotionally. And it's like, this is really weird because I think like Pheng was saying, that it's finding a community of folks, and I'm thinking of communities being 3 or 4 people even, where everybody is like I trust you enough, all of you, and the way you interact together, right? Because there can be a different dynamic when you're together. I trust all of you to let me really go there. And I understand that it's going to be reciprocated right around the circle, if you will. I think that's really it's really both interesting and tough to construct. And I know that I don't have, relationships in which when a third person is added, that other guy's like, yep, we can still have these serious conversations. And so if someone has that and experienced that, I'd love to hear about it.
It's weird because you're absolutely right. It's like somebody has to create a friction. Like as soon as it becomes a party, like 3 or more, it's weird how you say that. It's like too many. Like I don't even know how to say it. I think it just blew my mind. So I'm gonna just mute myself. But that's absolutely true. Like I always notice when the number increases, somebody has to be friction about it. Somebody has to like put the wall up and be like the super asshole, or just somebody like to demand the respect in the room, or just something. But yeah, that's hella true.
I think it's the way in which we have been socialized as men to be in groups, to sort of like gung-ho each other and up each other, But I think I have experienced spaces where, and I think this is one too, space where it's not about like showing my ego, or it's not about showing more than the other or knowing more than other people, but being able to contribute and explore and have explorations, right, with one another. And I think that there's not that many spaces for sure to what you were sharing, Roderic. And how do you also keep the conversation flowing in a way for an hour or two without getting sidetracked, right? Without moving it in ways that are then becoming harmful or violent, or talking about things that men do that are like contributing to the harmful things that we see in community. And so I think that that's the challenge, is keeping those conversations going for prolonged periods of time. And I like Serrano's point about checking in and being able to just spend time with one another, and doing that via like maybe even in a group chat or something like that, that's moving forward besides the one-on-one, right? And I think that as much as we perhaps, I think Serrano shared this earlier, as much as we don't think anybody cares about us, we really yearn for that, right? We really yearn for that connection, for that bondage or bonding, for that deep connection in our lives. And it's so vitally important, but to Bell Hook's point, is that we've cut ourselves off from that, because that was the first violent act that we had to do for ourselves, right? And she had said it beautifully in that way, is that patriarchy demands that we do that. We disconnect from ourselves, therefore we disconnect from other men and masculine folks in our lives because of homophobia. And so how do we sort of build that connection back? And I think that allows us to then do community, building healthy communities with and amongst men and masculine folks is really important in being able to do that. If we can overcome our own places of homophobia around that, of like being intimate with other men. And I think even in this conversation, maybe perhaps folks may be thinking about this conversation as us having a bromance, quote unquote, conversation, right? Because we like to create new terms and new language to describe how cisgender straight men are in relationship with each other in a way that's not gay or in a way that's not queer. But I think it's also really important to acknowledge that it's okay for men to be in intimate relationships and call it that, without coming up with new terms, right? Without coming up with new definitions, and that is perfectly normal for cisgender straight men to be in intimate, loving, caring relationships with one another, as well as with other masculine identified people. And so that was what was coming to my mind as we were having this conversation. I was like, would people be considering this, that? But I would say no. I think we are talking about more than that, right? More than quote unquote romance, and then hip terms that we would probably put on it.
Yeah, I keep thinking about it like it's for me it's like it's a muscle that I have to build. I have to develop this thing, it's like, and it's multiple layers, right? It's like I have to like sort of intentionally think about, how am I doing right now? Am I feeling really crappy? And now is a good time for me to reach out to Pheng or Felix or Ed or any of the, the people that I've built these trusting relationships with. And there's something I know for me around like admitting I need help or like asking for help is really, really hard, because I think there feels like a lot of pressure, I think, on men, on masculine people, to sort of just have our shit figured out and to like know what to do and to have answers. And I know a lot of the men in mask folks that I'm connected to, sort of look to me in that way to, for answers, and I think even just like admitting, like, I don't know, like saying things like that, I think make me feel really vulnerable. And at the same time, it's like, but if we can't even like acknowledge, like, yes, we do need help sometimes. Like, I can't lift this gigantic thing by myself. I have to actually have support. I have to actually like let people know that I need the help and actually like accept that too. I mean, that's really hard. I know in the last couple of weeks for me, it's, like dealing with this death and of this dear friend, and like just grief is a weird thing. Like, I have not had a lot of experience with it. And so many of the emotions I'm feeling have just been like really unknown. And like, I think people ask me, how are you? And I think the main thing I'm saying these days is I don't really know. And, like for me, that's okay, because I'm trying to practice into that. So like being okay with like not being okay. Because I think it's just part of it. It's part of our lives. It's part of our relationships. I think someone had mentioned like, there's conflict that happen. And, I mean, through the death of my friend, like so many of those memories came up of like, yeah, we had fights. We had hard conversations where he, as a person of color, was calling me out on some of my, white privilege and microaggressions. And so we did have hard conversations. And at the same time, it's like, that's all a part of this, like being in community together, because I think, if we're trying to build this safe, equitable, inclusive world, community, whatever, however you define that. And it's like, but that doesn't mean that like all hard things like death and conflict and all these things are still a part of it, right? And so like learning how to be together in the crises feels, almost just as important as like learning how to celebrate together and to be joyful and to share the good. And yeah, it's hard work though. I think that when you sort of start thinking about this as a man, as a masculine person, you're like, a lot of my friendships do kind of feel shallow. Like we get together and we drink beer and we talk about sports or like whatever it is. And maybe it dips a little deeper. But I think it's scary for us to go deeper. And, in the moments where I'm like, ooh, this feels scary, should I really tell Pheng this? Or should I really tell my boss that I'm struggling with working this week with my grief? And it's like, I don't know, it makes me think of something a teacher said recently to me, was like this idea that being courageous or being brave, like that happens because fear is there. It's a part of it. Like you wouldn't have courage if you didn't also have fear. And so there's something around there, like, I don't know, that just like I said, I don't know it. I don't have it all figured out for sure yet, but I think, you know, through having these conversations, it's like, oh, what do I think about that? Or what am I feeling about that? Like it's really powerful to just like stop and be like, what is the feeling in me? And now who can I share that with? And like just be vulnerable, and that's okay, you know. And in all those times when I've actually like made that decision, knowing like, oh, this feels hard, to share this part of me, you know, God, I want to say like 100% of the time, the people, the men, the masculine people have been like, yeah, I get that, or like, I feel that too, or, you know, so it's like, if we can get through that fear, I think there's so much connection that comes when we can just be real together.
I think it goes back to the points that were made earlier by Serrano and Roderic too, about not playing into each other's fear, perhaps, you know, Sean, to your point there, not playing into each other's hyping up of masculinity, and playing into that. And I think sometimes we do that to one another. We do that one to one another um, because we fear that, or I fear that other men will then judge me. So then I play into it, and now he's playing into it, and now the other guy's playing into it, and all of a sudden we're just all playing this game with one another, and we're no longer being real and genuine with each other. And so, how do I catch myself in those moments is really important. And how do I bring myself back to shifting the conversation, or shifting how I'm expressing myself or relating myself in that moment is really important, right? And because that's all that I could only control is myself in that connection and that building of healthy relationships with other men and masculine folks in my life, is to come back and only express myself in the way that I want to express myself with those individuals, and then know that at the same time that I have trust with them, at the same time also knowing that they then will carry that information elsewhere, or it will be shared elsewhere perhaps too. And so I think there is some of that catching and intentionality that I would have to do, or we would each have to do on our own end, or being able to really be open to feedback and insight, right? Like feedback. And that's the hardest thing, I think, for myself and other men individuals and masculine individuals that I've worked with and engaged with, is receiving feedback. Could be its own kitchen table conversation for all of us, of like, how do you receive feedback in a way where you don't go to your shame and where you don't go to your own guilt places. And so I think that that's perhaps the other thing, is how do we also acknowledge the feedback that we get in those spaces, like, oh, you're going in this too far over here, right?
Super happy to have this conversation. I wasn't in the previous one, but I had a chance to listen to it, and to just to think about the importance, to start thinking more about healing, and community healing, and how, because how we behave due to the society expectations and everything. It made me understand better myself, or try to understand better myself, and how I can not also understand myself, also understand others and their behavior sometimes. So, it is it's a beautiful conversation. I'm super happy and to listen to all of you, and yeah, I hope more people had a chance to listen to these conversations, just because they're healing, and they're very powerful.
intentionality is real. Because it's like once you know too, right? So like I'm pretty sure we all have moments where it's like you could have said something that you didn't, or you did say something and then you walk away like, yes, I did it. Like, so it is about that like active, like I think about active like choice a lot, you know, because I think for me one of the active choices that I had to learn to do was telling like people in my life who are males that I love them. Right. Like, let's be real. Like I'm from the project. So for me to say some shit like that, like it still sounds weird to this day. Like it does. Like even with my young cousins, like I walk away and I'm like, okay, all right, I love you. I'll see you later. And then they'll say it back. And I'm like, that shit sounds weird, but it feels better than it sounds. And it needs me to make the active choice to be honest about that in a moment in time, because it does. Like for me and my cousin to have that relationship, and no matter, even if he's just coming to chill, even if he's just coming for 30 minutes, even if I see him, he lives in Cloquet, so I'll even stop by if I'm just going somewhere. I'll stop by his house for 30 minutes, come see him, and then leave and be like, all right, I love you, and then I'll leave. And we all actually made an active choice a few years ago to do that with each other. And then my cousin who's turning 15, he's 15 now, he's being able to grow with men who can say that to each other comfortably, because it is a choice. Because like I said, it does sound weird to me. So what shit that sounds weird to you, I have the choice to not say it. It's very easy. It's the same thing about like how we get together and we start doing the friction, because that's very easy. It's very easy. It's hard to be that one person in the room to be like, oh no, I'm gonna do it. Like I'd rather change. So that's why like, I don't know, I love like the heart aspect of it. But when I think about it, like sometimes when you know, it does become the active, like, yeah, the active choice of doing it. Like I'm very big on knowing that in life we do things that are easier for us in a moment, but I rather do things that are hard in the moment so that things could become easy. Like saying I love you to my cousin. I want him to know, even if it's hard for me in the moment, I want him to know that I actually do love him. That's the easy part. For me, that's the easy part, because I know that, but he needs to know that. They need to know that every day, every time I see them. So I think about the active choice of telling, yeah, men in my life who I do love. Like obviously I'm not just like slinging those 3 words around to nobody, um, you know, no matter the gender, but just the men that you have in your life that you love. I make sure that I say it, whether it's through text, whether it's in person, because I really feel that. But does it sound weird? 98% of me don't want to say this shit. I'm not gonna lie to you. Like 98% of you be like, no, I don't say no shit like that. Like, because it comes to words of like what we said earlier, like the intimate part of being like the man. Like some people would call that sadly suspect, and it's like, no, I'm showing you and I'm telling you that I have love for you. If I could come to you with my darkest secrets, that's love. If I could come to you with a motherfucker on me and like we need to get together, that's love. If I come to your family's gathering, that's love. Like, so I think we undermine how much love we actually do have for each other, and then we just don't say it at all. Like, I make sure I say that shit now. I don't care how it sounds. Like, even when I see people I haven't seen in a while, I make the choice to say, and it just stuck with me. I don't know why, but it made the choice to say, it's good to see you. And even when I like leave them, I'm like, why the fuck did I say that? And I'm just like, because it was good to see them. Like, and so I'm gonna be honest, like, whether you care about me or not, I'm like, oh yes, because it is. Like I have people who are no longer alive. So when I see you, I'm dead ass serious. Like it really is good to see you breathing, walking, healthy, smiling, talking, you know, being able to be in life. So I think when it comes that time of the corner, we gotta like, I think about me as making the active choice of doing it. And for me, one of the things that I did right now is making sure that I say that I love them every time I see them, every time we depart. Because we know that, right? We show it, but we also have to hear it. Like we're humans at the end of the day. So that level of reassurance is still real. No matter how tough, no matter how big, you know, you may seem, um, telling my cousins that I love them, like I can only imagine like what that does for somebody. Because I'm the oldest, so obviously, obviously with that, like it brings a lot more for them. Um, so I could just only imagine, but it's not about that. It's about me being honest to them. Like I don't want them to ever think I don't love them because I don't say it. But it's very easy for us to think that we're humans again. So if I don't hear something for like a long time, it's very easy for me to be like, well, does he love me? He don't actually say the shit. Like he don't actually say it. So does he? So, you know, people who I do have love for that I love, I'll tell them straight up when I see him, and you know, I do love you. Like, and I'm old enough to the point where I don't care how you feel, but like I don't care how you see it anymore. Like, you know, you could call it whatever you want, like at least call it love first too. So
I think positivity and love is contagious. I think genuine, and also you can feel it in people. I also tell you a lot about the values of that individual. So sometimes you can see sometimes people that get to a room and they shine. They're very positive. They bring a lot of this positive vibe that's contagious. And I think using those words that sometimes they're not normally used, you can change everybody, perspective at the moment and the momentum and the room. So it is very important to use those words of love and affection, positivity, because it helps. I think it is very contagious, and when you feel it, just embrace it, and be sure that people start getting more used to those words and that positivity, because we all need it. We're going through difficult times, and that's life. So yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I love what you shared there, Serrano, and I definitely can. Yeah, I've been doing something similar with my friends too, and it feels a little weird, and it's like, is he gonna say it back to me, or like, is it gonna be one of those weird, like in a movie where the girl is like, thank you, or like something. I don't know what it is, but it just made me kind of chuckle because I was thinking about being with Ed yesterday, and we had this really nice gathering, chat, and it was really, really beautiful. And I was getting ready to leave, put my shoes on, whatever. We're standing at the door, and he was like, all right, thanks again for being here. And I had this thought. I was like, I could use another hug. And I had a moment where I was like, do I even say something, but I did. I was like, you know what, can I get another hug? And he was just like, yes. I mean, and it's, there's something there about just like asking for what we need, and those things like seem little and small and kind of silly, but like, yeah, when my friend Orion says I love you at the end of our call, it's like, yeah, I love you too, and I want you to know that. And those things are huge for us. So yeah, just really beautiful. I love that.
Wow. You guys, I've just been drinking all this wisdom in. This is fantastic and terrifying and humbling and brilliant. So thank you very much.
That is so true, Roderic. The terrifying part of it. It is so true because it speaks to Sean's point about vulnerability and being it. And now are you going to then be tipped off, right? But I think this is this is what it looks like when men can build intimate and loving relationships with one another, right? This is what we can create. And this is the kind of community that men can actually thrive in and masculine folks can thrive in, is to be seen and to be heard and to be felt, right? The empathizing part of it that I think we're all sharing about here is really, really important because we know that men have been, and masculine folks have been socialized to cut off that empathy part, right? And so being able to do that gets us to these places. And I think that to Felix's point exactly, this is a very enriching conversation. And every time we come to this space or I come to this space, it's always enriching to have these conversations with each one of you, and always appreciating each one of you for showing up and putting not only just your best thinking effort, but like putting yourself out there in ways that perhaps you may not have done so with other men, right? Because this is a very public format as well too. And it is about us showing and modeling it and hoping that other men across our communities in our state would be able to do that and build with one another. And we hope that all of you who are joining us can have the opportunities to do that, or at least connect with us so we can help you do some of that as well too. And I'll give Sean the last closing thoughts here.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I feel very supported and held in this space, and so I'm grateful to each of you, and I know each of you have checked in with me too in these hard moments, and it's everything. That's what we need, and reconnecting to that deeper feeling, caring, hurting, you know, part of ourselves, I think is so important. And I also just want to mention again, you know, I mean, we discussed suicide in this conversation, and I believe Austin has dropped in a resource there, the National Suicide Prevention Hotline. So if you or someone you know are having suicidal thoughts or thinking about those things or making a plan, you know, please call that hotline. Please reach out to a friend. And again, just very grateful to each of you and to all of you who have tuned in today for our 20th conversation. Feels like we've always been doing these, and I hope we will continue for a long time because they're so good, so enriching. So we hope that you have found some of that as well as you're watching and listening to us, and yeah, hopefully that modeling is something that I think, as we're all saying, we don't know, we don't have all the right answers, and then hopefully you can take that too and be like, I don't know how to do this either, but I'm gonna try. I'm gonna be brave. I'm gonna say I love you, and if someone says thank you, that's okay too, you know. So thank you again to our funding partners, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Minnesota, as well as the Novo Foundation for all of their support in these conversations. Our next conversation will be live on Thursday, 2 weeks from now, June 3rd at noon, and we'll continue these authentic, caring conversations. And we hope you'll join us, share this, invite your friends to join the conversation, and we will see you all next time. Take good care, everyone.